Today I'm going to show you guys step by step how to build a $1,000 budget all Intel gaming PC, because it's almost holiday season, which means time to catch up on playing all the latest games. There's also some pretty sick CPU and GPU bundle deals going on right now at Newegg, so if you are thinking about building a PC, it's a great time. I'll make sure to link everything down below in the description. And we're also giving this PC away to one of our subscribers, so make sure you watch till the end of the video to find out how to enter that. Thanks to Intel for sponsoring this one. Let's get into it. Okay, so here's a quick rundown on screen of all the parts and the budget. Feel free to pause the screen so you can check it out. This is going to be a 1080p/1440p build featuring the Intel i5-13600KF, along with the Intel Arc A770 16GB. This is the very unique looking Acer Predator BiFrost OC edition, and this system is going to get you anywhere from between 60 FPS high settings all the way up to 144 FPS and above, depending on the game and resolution. Of course, we will have benchmarks later on. For the case, we're using the Deepcool CH370. This is actually a really good value case. It's got mesh on the front, it's nice and compact, you get an included fan in the back. We've got everything we need right here, so let's get into the build. So starting off with the CPU, this is the Intel i5-13600KF. It's got 14 cores, 20 threads, and it's a fantastic option for a first build like this, not only because it's great value, but also if you ever decide in the future you want to upgrade to, say, a more powerful GPU, this isn't going to bottleneck your system, it's more than capable. Now to install it, grab your motherboard. This is the MSI Pro B760. It's a pretty simple but stealthy looking board, and most importantly, it fits our budget. We don't want to be spending a ton on a motherboard when we've only got $1,000. To install the CPU, we're going to lift up this latch right here to unlock the socket. Next, locate this little gold arrow on the CPU. If the text is facing the right way up, then it should be in the bottom left. We'll align that golden arrow with the bottom left of the motherboard. Just double check to make sure that your orientation matches mine. And then we'll just gently place it down into the socket. Now, you don't need any pressure whatsoever here. It should just drop in. Then all we need to do is just put this cover back down. Now, when you press it, it should pop off like that. Keep that somewhere safe because you might need that later on. And then finally, grab this lever. You're going to need to push it down. You'll probably have to apply quite a bit of force here. You're not going to break it, don't worry, but just slide it under there, and then the CPU is installed. Moving on to the memory or RAM, we're going to be using 32GB of DDR4 3600MHz from Lexar. This is the Hades OC. Actually, it looks really clean. I like it a lot. It also matches very well with the motherboard and helps to complement that stealthy look. To install them, unlock these two latches on the motherboard. So if you're looking from left to right, this should be latch number 2 and 4. You just have to press down on them. Now, some motherboards also unlock at the bottom. This motherboard doesn't, so yeah, it's literally just those two. Next, you want to take one of the RAM modules. Now, we're going to flip it around so that the sticker is on this side. You'll also notice there's a little notch on it. This is going to line up with the notch on the motherboard. We'll take the RAM module, drop the bottom side in first, and then once you've got it lined up, we're going to take both hands and firmly press down until you hear a click. That's that one in. We'll do the second one. So again, flip it around so the sticker's facing this way, drop the bottom side in first, and that one is also installed. Okay, so moving on to storage. Now, because we're trying to keep this build around $1,000, we're going to be using a 512GB NVMe M.2. This isn't a huge amount of space, but it is super fast, and it's certainly big enough to install a handful of games. This one is an Acer Predator model. I thought, why not match it with the GPU we're going to be using? To install it, grab a small screwdriver, and we're going to take out these two screws off of the motherboard heatsink. Put that to one side, and then we'll take our M.2. Now for this one, we actually need to flip it kind of upside down. You'll notice there's a notch here. This notch aligns with the notch on the motherboard. So we'll take the M.2, we'll put it in at about a 30-degree angle like this, and then from there you can push it down. Now this motherboard actually has a retention clip, so we don't need a screw here. We just push up this little clip, and the M.2 will stay in place by itself. Then just grab your heatsink again. Now you'll probably have a piece of plastic on here. Make sure you peel that off before you put it back on. With that said, we will line this back up and put the screws back in. Let's move on to the cooler. Now for the price, this thing is a beast. It's from Thermalright, it's called the Phantom Spirit. And yeah, this is not only going to allow our CPU to run nice and cool, it's also very quiet as well, so your PC isn't going to sound like a jet engine. Now before we install it, we do need to prep the motherboard. Now you want to grab this bracket, and if I show you guys up close, yeah, it should say LGA 1700 on the back, so just double check to make sure you've got the right one because it does come with two. Peel off these little two pieces of tape. This is just going to help it to stick to the back of the motherboard. Flip your board over, pop it on the back like that, and we're good to move on to the next step. Next, grab the bag with the blue standoffs in it. It also has some screws in. Take your blue standoffs, put all 4 of them on the motherboard like this. And then once you've done that, take these 2 silver brackets. You're going to face them inwards like this, and just place one on the top side and one on the bottom side. Then all you've got to do is just take the 4 screws, put them in place, and get them all screwed in. That is all secure. Next up is the thermal paste. Now you should have received a little tube of this in the same box that the cooler came in, and all we're gonna do is twist off the cap like that. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. With these newer CPUs, I like to do a pea-sized dot in the middle, so around something like that, and then I also do a little smaller dot in each corner. Now, I've seen so many people get super stressed out about doing the thermal paste. Honestly, guys, it really doesn't matter too much. You can't really use too much thermal paste. As you can see here, mine isn't perfect, but yeah, this is gonna be fine. Next up, grab your cooler. Now, do not forget to peel off this little sticker right here. Once that sticker is removed, we can take the cooler like this, align it up with these 2 pins right here, and just place it down gently. And then to get it all tightened up, locate these 2 screws and screw them in. By the way, I also find it better to swap between each of the 2 screws as you're tightening them down, that way the cooler doesn't get lopsided. Cooler is looking all good. I'm gonna put this to one side for a second so we can grab the fans. Once you got your fans, flip them both over so that you can see the back side of the fan. Also, make sure to have your cables facing down. This is gonna make cable management easier later. Then in the same box your cooler came in, you should have 4 of these metal brackets. These are gonna allow us to attach the fans to the heatsink. So we're gonna take one of them, we'll stretch it over these little holes. Do the same for the other side. And then of course we can't forget about the second fan as well. Once those are on, put the fans to one side and grab your motherboard. There's actually a couple of ways you can install these fans. Ordinarily, I would go with a fan on the front and a fan in the middle with the air going through the heatsink towards the back of the case. The only problem is that our RAM is quite tall. So as you can see, when I put on this fan, it kind of sticks over the top of the heatsink, which we don't really want. So what I'd suggest doing in this case is go with your middle fan as normal and then move this one to the back. As long as the air is going towards the back of the case, there's really not much difference. Anyway, onto the install. So make sure you can see the back side of the fan and that your cable is facing downwards. Slot this into the center column right here. Once you're happy with the placement, you're going to take these 2 clips and just stretch them over the heatsink, and that should hold the fan in place. Same deal for the second fan, so again make sure you can see the back of it and that the cable is facing downwards. We'll put this over here, and again once you're happy with the placement, stretch each of the clips over the heatsink, and that is the fan/cooler installed. We do, however, need to plug in the fans, so inside the same box that your cooler came in, you will have received this splitter. So we're just going to plug each of the fans into this side of the Y splitter. And then if you look carefully on your motherboard, you should see this fan header. It says CPU fan 1, and you're going to take the other end of the Y splitter and plug that in. If you want, you can tidy up these cables a little bit. You can either zip tie them or just kind of tuck them under the heatsink. Yeah, that looks a little bit cleaner. It's almost time to install the motherboard into the case. Now, before we do that, we need to grab our I/O shield. So this should have come inside your motherboard box. Make sure it's lined up the same as mine. And we're just gonna take this and pop it into the back of the case. They can be a little bit tricky to get in, but you should hear a little click. Grab the motherboard, we'll align it with these standoffs that are pre-installed inside the case. Also, just double check to make sure that you can see all your ports right here. We can start putting all the screws into the motherboard now, so you should have received a pack of these with your case. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the case does already come with 1 fan pre-installed in the back. We are going to be adding 3 intakes to the front. I went with these RGB fans from upHere. They're actually really cheap. They were less than $20 for a 3-pack, which is pretty crazy. We need to pop the front of the case off first, so if you just pull on the bottom and kind of pull forwards, it should just pop right off. And then take one of your fans, make sure you can see this side of the fan, not this side, and pop it just behind this frame, and your screws are going to go in right here. Once the fans are all installed, you can get the front panel popped back on. And then it is time to get all the fans plugged in. This cable right here is coming from the rear fan. Now this is going to want to be plugged into system fan 2, which is down here. I'll overlay just the motherboard outside of the case for you guys so you can see it more clearly. Now one thing to note about this motherboard is it only has 2 system fan headers. We just use system fan number 2, which leaves us with system fan number 1 right up here. However, we have 3 fans to plug in, so how are we going to fix that? So this thing is a 3-way fan splitter. I'll link it down below in the description, and this will allow us to put 3 fans into one connector. So take this side of the splitter and get that plugged into system fan number 1 down there. Again, I'll overlay the motherboard outside of the case here so you can see that more clearly. Now, for the sake of cable management and keeping everything nice and tidy, I went ahead and flipped the case over, removed the rear panel, and as you can see, I have poked the splitter cable through this little hole near the top of the motherboard, and I also fed all of the fan cables through this little section as well. All that's left to do is to plug the 3 fans into the splitter. And then yeah, that is all of the fans connected and everything is nice and tidy inside the back of the case. If you want to be really neat, you can even zip tie these as well. The time has come to install the PSUs. So this is a 650 watt model from EVGA. The build draws roughly around 515 watts, so 650 is plenty and gives us a little bit of extra headroom. Now to install this, face the fan downwards towards the ground. Obviously you can see this is the power socket right here. And we're gonna slide this into the case kind of backwards. And then you should be able to see these 4 screw holes here, align them and get your screws put in. Now we're going to take this opportunity to start getting some of the cables plugged in, and to do that we're on the back side of the case. We'll take this big connector, this is the motherboard power, and poke it through this hole right here. This one that's labeled CPU is going to go into this hole. The one labeled PCIe is going through this hole. That one's going to be for the GPU later on. So that's the main power cables fed through to the front section of the case. You'll notice we have this big bunch of cables right here, and these are responsible for the front I/O. So we've got like USB port, we have like the power button on here. These are quite important, so we'll get these popped through to the front as well. We'll do the big one first. So this is the USB 3 connector that's going to go through there. HD audio is going to go through the hole that's just above the PSU. And then you should just be left with these 3 tiny cables. There is another cutout right here under the motherboard, so we'll pop those through there. Now we are going to be left over with a few cables from the power supply. We're not going to be using these in this particular build, but these are SATA power connectors and Molex. So if you use, say, like extra hard drives, that is what is going to power those. But like I said, for this build, I don't need them, so I'm just going to zip tie them up. And there's plenty of space for these just to tuck down inside the bottom section of the case. We'll flip the case over so we can do the front side now. Now again, I'm going to overlay the motherboard outside of the case so that you guys can see everything much more clearly, but we'll start off with the big cable. This is the motherboard power. We can also plug in the CPU power connector up in the top left of the motherboard. USB 3 connector is going in this one. HD audio goes in the bottom left of the motherboard. And then finally the 3 tiny ones, these are the front panel connectors. Make sure you plug these in because one of them is the power switch, and if you don't plug that in, your PC is not going to boot. But anyway, I'll put a diagram up on screen so you can get a closer look at how to plug these in. It's labeled JFP1 on the motherboard. We'll go from left to right. Now just before you plug these in, flip the connector over to the side that doesn't have the text on it, and you should be able to see a little arrow. This is the positive side of the connector. We'll do the hard drive LED first, so this is going to go on the bottom row in pins number 1 and 2. You want to make sure that the arrow side is on the left. Next up is the reset switch, so this one's going to go on pins number 3 and 4 on the bottom row. And then finally we have the power switch. This is the important one, so this is going to be going on the top row in pins number 3 and 4. Now at this point you probably noticed that there is quite a lot of cables in the front of the case. That is just because we pulled them all through earlier. So what I would advise you do now is just flip the case back up like this and just pull some of the excess through the back. Oh, apart from the GPU cable, because we're going to need that. Again, this is probably a good time to zip tie some stuff down if you want to keep everything nice and neat. That's all looking pretty good. I'm very happy with that. So we'll grab our rear panel now and put it back on. It's finally time to install the GPU, so we're going to be using the Intel Arc A770 16GB for this build. This is the Acer Predator BiFrost OC. It's got a really interesting cooling solution with its dual fan setup, and also unique to this specific model is the BiFrost utility app, so you can use this to tune a bunch of settings on the GPU. Now this is going to pair perfectly with our Intel CPU. In fact, it's great because they can work together on a bit of a deeper level versus having a CPU and GPU from different manufacturers. Not to mention, in this price range, the value you get in, especially with that 16GB of VRAM, is really impressive, along with dedicated RT cores. And Intel Arc GPUs have also come a really long way since launch when it comes to drivers. They've been continuously updating and improving them. To install our GPU, we first need to remove a couple of PCIe slot covers up here, so grab your screwdriver and remove the first 2. Now they'll actually kind of stay in place until you undo this latch, so just bear that in mind. Make sure to hold the slot covers when you undo this because they will fall out. and leave this thing undone for now until we've installed the GPU. Back over in the front of the case, unlock this latch by pressing down on it. Then we'll take our GPU, line up the gold connector with the connector on the motherboard, and get it slotted in. All we've got to do to finish off installing it is just pop these 2 screws back in. Oh, and you can also retighten that little piece on the back of the case. The last step is to plug in the 2 PCIe cables. So one goes in there, and the second one right next to it. And with the GPU plugged in, the build is complete. We can go ahead and get the glass side panel put back on. And of course, we can't forget to do the peel. We'll get it plugged in so we can give it a quick test. So pop your power cable in the back here, and don't forget to flip the switch to the on position. And 3, 2, 1. It works. Now, you got this far and your PC turned on. Congratulations, you have successfully built your first PC. But before you can use it, you will need to install an operating system. Now, I did a step-by-step tutorial on how to install Windows. I'll put a link in the top right, super easy to follow, so go do that and then come back here. Also, you'll want to enable XMP for your RAM inside the BIOS so that you get the advertised speed. You can do this by booting the PC and mashing the delete key. Inside the BIOS, go to the XMP section and set it to XMP Profile 1. And then make sure to exit and save changes, and you are good to go. Okay, onto some benchmarks, because I'm sure you guys are very interested to see how this thing performs. Now, this system is definitely capable of doing 1440p, since you do have 16 gigs of VRAM on the GPU, but for the benchmark tests, I'm going to be playing at 1080p, just because I feel like that's the main target resolution for this kind of price point. But yeah, with that said, let's check out the benchmarks. Hopefully you guys found this one helpful. If you want to check out any of the parts so you can copy this exact build, I'll have them linked down below in the description. Don't forget to check out the Newegg link as well. Like I said, there's some great CPU, GPU bundle deals going on right now, some of which include Assassin's Creed Mirage as well, which I still need to play. Now, you probably want to know how you can win this PC. All you need to do is drop a comment down below. You can say why you want the PC or what games you're going to play. I'll pick and announce the winner 7 days after this video goes live, so look out for a giveaway winner announcement video on this channel. With that said, drop a like if you enjoyed, hit that subscribe button if you're new. Once again, thanks to Intel for making this video possible, and we'll catch you all in the next one.